The luxury sedan glided to a stop a few blocks from a restaurant. Ethan Lawson exhaled sharply, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His usual sharp gray suit had been swapped for a faded hoodie and jeans. The neatly trimmed beard he was known for had been replaced with a thicker, more unkempt one, courtesy of a professional disguise artist. Even his expensive watch had been tucked away in the glove compartment. To the world, he was no longer Ethan Lawson, CEO of Horizon Dining Group. He was just another customer. He stepped onto the sidewalk, feeling the slight chill of the evening breeze. The air carried the aroma of grilled meat, toasted buns, and deep-fried comfort. His stomach clenched, not from hunger, but from anticipation. This was his company, his restaurant, and yet he was walking in as a stranger. Grill Haven stood at the corner of the street, its neon sign flickering with an occasional stutter. The windows were slightly fogged, and through them, Ethan could see a line forming near the counter. It wasn't packed, but there were enough customers for a dinner rush. He adjusted his hoodie and pushed through the door, instantly greeted by the mingling scents of sizzling beef and overused fryer oil. The atmosphere felt off. There was no warmth in the greetings from the cashier, a young woman with tired eyes and a robotic tone. Customers stood impatiently, their expressions shifting between frustration and resignation. The faint hum of conversation was interrupted only by the sharp clang of a spatula hitting the grill and the occasional bark of orders being called out. Ethan moved to join the line, hands in his pockets, observing. Behind the counter, the employees moved with an exhausted efficiency. The kitchen staff worked at a hurried pace, but their motions lacked energy. The manager, a broad-shouldered man with thinning hair, stood near the register, arms crossed. His name tag read Greg. He wasn't helping, wasn't even pretending to. He was watching. As Ethan inched forward, the faint sound of a voice reached him from the kitchen, barely audible over the sizzling grill. I swear, if that greedy CEO saw how hard we work, maybe he'd stop counting his millions and fix this dump. The words hit him like a jolt of electricity. His grip tightened in his pockets, his breath pausing for just a fraction of a second. He turned his head slightly, trying to locate the source. Somewhere behind the kitchen's swinging doors, employees moved in and out, but he couldn't see who had spoken. A sharp laugh followed. You think he even knows this place exists? We're just numbers to him. Ethan's pulse drummed in his ears. He had come expecting problems. Every business had them. But hearing this raw bitterness firsthand was something else entirely. The line moved forward. The cashier barely made eye contact as she took the next order. I'll have a double classic with fries, Ethan said, keeping his voice neutral. She tapped at the register, monotone. Dine in or to go. Dine in. She gave him the total, and he paid in cash, collecting his receipt with a distracted nod. His focus remained on the voices behind the counter. Near the grill, a middle-aged man flipped patties with practiced skill. His uniform was faded, a small grease stain near the collar. His name tag read Mike. He worked quickly, but there was a stiffness in his shoulders, the kind that came from years of strain. Another worker, a young man in his early 20s, moved between the fryer and the prep station. His movements were less fluid, almost hesitant. Then there was Sarah, the server at the pickup counter. She balanced a tray of food with one hand while handing out drinks with the other. A single strand of hair had escaped from her ponytail, sticking to her forehead, but she had no free hand to fix it. Ethan took a seat at the far end of the dining area, near the window. From here, he could watch everything. At first, it was the little details, the way Sarah's smile faltered after each customer interaction, how Mike stretched his wrist between orders like it ached, how the younger worker flinched slightly whenever Greg passed by. It painted a picture more vivid than any financial report. Then came the moment that confirmed everything. Sarah turned to Greg, brushing a strand of hair back. Hey, we're running low on fries again. We need a fresh batch. Greg didn't look up from his phone. Use what's left. Make it work. But they're cold, Sarah pressed, lowering her voice. People are already complaining. Greg's gaze snapped up, sharp and irritated. Then tell them it's policy. You want to run this place, Sarah? No. Then stop wasting my time. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Ethan exhaled slowly, pressing his palm against the table surface. He had seen enough. He had come looking for answers, and now he had them. What he did next would change everything. Ethan sat at the corner table, his meal untouched, his focus fixed on the strained movements of the employees. The discontent in the air was palpable. It clung to every interaction, every hurried step, every hushed conversation behind the counter. He wasn't just observing inefficiency. He was witnessing frustration that had been left to fester. Sarah moved between the counter and the kitchen, her ponytail now slightly undone, her hands constantly full. She delivered orders with practiced speed, but there was no energy behind it, no sign of the enthusiasm that frontline workers were supposed to have in a company that prided itself on service. Ethan watched as she passed by a younger worker, the kid who had been bouncing between the fryer and the prep station. His name tag read Javier. He looked barely out of college, his movements uncertain, as if every action required second-guessing. "Can you cover me for a second?" Sarah asked in a low voice. Javier hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, but I think Greg's watching." Sarah exhaled, rubbing her forehead. "He's always watching." Ethan traced the exchange with his eyes, making mental notes. Greg, still perched near the counter, scrolled through his phone, seemingly detached from the chaos around him. Every few minutes, he glanced up, not to help, but to scrutinize. The tension in his posture was clear. He wasn't just indifferent, he was controlling. A sharp clang from the kitchen drew Ethan's attention. Mike, the veteran cook, had just dropped a metal spatula onto the grill. He flexed his wrist, shaking it out. Even from his seat, Ethan could see the way his fingers curled stiffly, as if his joints ached. "Everything okay, Mike?" Sarah asked. Mike gave a tight nod. "Yeah, just the usual. Been telling Greg the heat on this grill's uneven. If I'm not careful, one side burns while the other stays raw." Sarah shot a glance toward Greg, who still hadn't looked up. "Didn't he tell corporate about it?" Mike let out a humorless chuckle. "Said he did. That was 6 months ago." Ethan's jaw clenched. 6 months? The cost of replacing a grill was minuscule compared to the company's earnings. Yet here was one of their busiest locations, running on broken equipment and empty promises. A man in a suit approached the counter, placing a rushed order. Within minutes, his tray was handed to him. He barely took 2 steps before stopping, a look of irritation flashing across his face. "These fries are cold." Sarah flinched. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'll..." Greg finally looked up. "It's policy," he said flatly. "We don't remake orders unless they're sent back immediately." The customer scoffed. "They are immediately cold. That's the problem." Greg crossed his arms. "We can reheat them." Ethan felt a slow burn in his chest. This wasn't just negligence. This was policy being used as an excuse to cut corners at the expense of customers and employees alike. Sarah moved quickly, already scooping fresh fries into a new container despite Greg's orders. "Here you go, sir," she said, voice firm. The customer nodded in approval and walked away. Greg's expression darkened. "Sarah." She turned, jaw tight. "Office. Now." A heavy silence settled over the employees. Sarah hesitated, but after a brief glance at Javier and Mike, she set down the scoop and disappeared into the back. Ethan's fingers curled around the edge of the table. He had seen enough. He rose slowly, pushing his untouched tray aside. His heartbeat was steady, but there was a storm building beneath it. Every instinct told him to step in, to stop what was about to happen behind that door. But if he acted now, he would lose his chance to expose everything. Instead, he moved toward the counter. Javier was refilling drink cups, his hands slightly shaky. Mike flipped another patty, wincing as he gripped the spatula. Neither looked up. Ethan leaned in slightly. "That happen often?" Javier blinked. "What?" "Greg. The way he treats her." Javier hesitated, then shot a cautious glance at the kitchen door. "Sarah's been here the longest, after Mike. Greg rides her harder than anyone." Ethan nodded. "And you?" Javier let out a quiet laugh. "Me? I'm new. I just keep my head down. It's not like anyone's listening when we complain." "They don't listen," Mike muttered, not looking away from a grill. "They don't care." Ethan studied him for a moment. "Why stay?" Mike exhaled through his nose. 15 years. You don't walk away from that overnight." He lifted his spatula. "Not everyone's got options." 15 years. 15 years of service. And yet his equipment was broken, his shifts were grueling, and his experience meant nothing. The door to the office creaked open. Sarah emerged, her expression carefully blank, but there was tension in her shoulders. She walked past Greg without looking at him, heading straight for the drink station. Ethan knew that look. It was the look of someone who had just been given an ultimatum. Greg, satisfied, turned back toward the dining area, locking eyes with Ethan. For the first time since walking through the doors of his own restaurant, Ethan smiled. Because now it wasn't just about observation. It was about confrontation. The tension in the restaurant had settled into something thick and unspoken. Ethan remained at his table, observing the fractured rhythm of the kitchen, the barely contained resentment in the employee's eyes, the way Greg carried himself like a man who had nothing to fear. That was about to change. A tray clattered against the counter as a customer, a young woman in a blazer, sighed in frustration. "Excuse me," she said, flagging down Javier. "This burger's raw in the middle." Javier looked to the kitchen, hesitant. Mike turned from the grill, rubbing his wrist, his face etched with the weariness of a man who had fought this battle too many times before. "Damn thing's running too hot on one side, too cold on the other," he muttered. "I'll fix it." Before he could reach for another patty, Greg stepped in. "We don't do remakes unless it's a health risk," he said, not even glancing at the food. The customer frowned. "Excuse me." "It's policy," Greg said, his voice clipped. "We're not wasting food just because someone wants their burger a little different." Ethan caught the flicker of hesitation in Javier's face, the frustration in Sarah's stiffened posture. The air shifted. This wasn't just bad management. It was calculated disregard for the very people keeping this place running. Sarah took a step forward. "Greg, it's undercooked. We can't." "I said no." Greg's voice cracked like a whip. The woman shook her head, dropping her tray into the trash. Unbelievable. She turned and walked out, the bell above the door jingling with finality. Ethan pushed his chair back slowly, standing. His stomach burned, not from hunger, but from something far deeper, something colder. He had seen enough. He crossed the floor with measured steps, coming to a stop just behind the counter. Sarah's eyes flickered to him, confused. Javier stepped back instinctively. Mike stopped grilling. Even Greg hesitated for a fraction of a second before his face twisted into something smug. "You again?" Greg scoffed. "What, you got an issue too?" Ethan smiled. It was a small, unreadable thing. "Yeah," he said. "I do." Greg folded his arms, tilting his head. "That's so." Ethan exhaled, then reached up. His fingers gripped the edge of his fake beard and pulled. A slow gasp rippled through the room. The disguise came off in one smooth motion, revealing sharp features, neatly trimmed facial hair, and piercing blue eyes that now carried the full weight of authority. Greg's arms dropped. His expression flickered, first with confusion, then with slow, creeping horror. Javier took an unconscious step back. Sarah's eyes widened. Mike, for the first time that night, cracked a slow, knowing smile. Ethan let the silence stretch. Let the reality settle. Let Greg feel it. Then, with the kind of calm that preceded a storm, he spoke. "I'm Ethan Lawson," he said. "I own this company." The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Greg's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Ethan stepped forward, closing the space between them. "I've spent the last 2 hours watching you ignore customers, belittle your employees, and enforce policies that have nothing to do with company standards. Tell me, Greg," he tilted his head slightly, "is that also policy?" Greg swallowed. "Sir, Save it," Ethan cut in, his voice sharp. "I don't want excuses. I want to know why." The room was deathly silent. Even customers at nearby tables were frozen, watching the moment unfold. Greg straightened his shoulders, forcing confidence into his voice. I was just following protocol, sir. Making sure things run efficiently. Ethan let out a slow breath, nodding as if considering the words. Then he turned to Sarah. Is that true? Sarah hesitated. Then, with a deep inhale, she squared her shoulders. No, she said. It's not. Ethan nodded. Javier. The younger man glanced at Greg, then back at Ethan. His hands clenched at his sides. No, sir. It's not. Ethan turned to Mike, who simply raised an eyebrow. 15 years, Lawson, he muttered. You already know the answer. Greg's composure cracked. They're lying, he spat. They're lazy. They don't respect authority. Ethan's gaze hardened. Respect is earned, Greg. And from what I've seen, you don't deserve it. Greg's face turned red. You're done, Ethan said, voice like stone. Turn in your keys. You're fired. A beat of stunned silence passed. Then Greg scoffed, letting out a short, disbelieving laugh. You think I care? You think this job matters to me? He stepped forward, voice rising. You think these people are worth anything? They're replaceable. All of them. Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He simply took a step closer, lowering his voice to something lethal. Get out. Greg hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough to realize there was nothing left for him here. Then, with a final sneer, he threw down his name tag and stormed out. The door slammed shut behind him. Silence filled the restaurant once more. But this time, it wasn't tension. It was something closer to relief. Ethan turned to the employees. Sarah, you're in charge until I get a district manager in here. Sarah blinked. Wait, what? Mike, Ethan continued, ignoring her shock, you're getting a raise immediately. Javier, I want a full report on everything Greg's been doing here. Javier nodded, still looking shell-shocked. Ethan exhaled, glancing around the restaurant. The faces watching him were still cautious, still hesitant to believe that anything had truly changed. So he gave them the only thing that mattered. A promise. This isn't how I run my company, he said. And from this moment on, it never will be again. The restaurant felt different. The thick, oppressive atmosphere that had loomed over the place like an unshakable fog was finally gone. In its place was a fragile but undeniable sense of hope. The employees, once stiff and hesitant, now moved with something close to relief, though uncertainty still lingered in their eyes. The damage Greg had done wouldn't be erased in a single night, but at least the healing had begun. Ethan stood near the counter, watching as Sarah coordinated orders with Javier, her voice steadier now, more confident. Mike moved around the grill with something resembling ease, though the stiffness in his wrist still gave him trouble. Ethan made a mental note, a new grill, new equipment, and a proper benefits package. These weren't just numbers in a spreadsheet. These were people who had kept his business running despite everything. Order up. Mike called, sliding a fresh burger onto the counter. Sarah turned, grabbing the tray, then hesitated. Her gaze flickered to Ethan, something unreadable in her eyes. Finally, she spoke. You really meant it? About the raise, the changes. Ethan met her gaze head on. I don't make empty promises. She nodded slowly, but there was something else beneath her expression, something like quiet scrutiny. I gotta ask, she said after a moment. Why now? Ethan exhaled. He could have given her the polished corporate answer, something about valuing employees and ensuring company success. But after everything he'd seen tonight, she deserved more than that. Because I lost sight of things, he admitted. I thought I could trust the people I put in charge to take care of my employees. I was wrong. And that's on me. Sarah studied him, then gave a small, approving nod. Most people at your level don't own up to mistakes like that. Then most people at my level are doing it wrong. A faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips. The door chimed, drawing Ethan's attention. A middle-aged woman in a manager's uniform walked in, her sharp eyes scanning the restaurant. She spotted Ethan immediately and strode toward him with purpose. Mr. Lawson, she said, offering a hand. Maggie Ortiz, district manager. I came as soon as I heard. Ethan shook her hand. Maggie, we've got a lot to talk about. She glanced around, taking in the employees, the customers, the lingering tension in the air. From what I understand, Greg should have been dealt with months ago. He should have, Ethan agreed. But he wasn't, and I need to make sure nothing like this happens again. Maggie nodded. I'll start by reviewing every complaint filed in this location and checking in with the rest of the district. If Greg was a symptom of a bigger issue, we need to root it out. Good, Ethan said. And Sarah, he turned to her. She's been holding this place together. I want her officially promoted. Sarah's eyes widened. Wait, what? You earned it, Ethan said simply. Maggie arched an eyebrow. I assume this comes with a pay increase? Ethan gave her a dry look. I'm not in the habit of promoting people for free, Maggie. Maggie smirked. Good, because neither am I. Sarah shook her head, still looking a little stunned. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Ethan told her. Sarah exhaled. Then, slowly, she nodded. Okay. Yeah. Yes. A slow ripple of approval passed through the employees. Mike gave an approving grunt, and Javier grinned. Ethan turned back to Maggie. We'll also be investing in new equipment, reviewing health benefits, and making sure wages are competitive. I want a full audit of every location in this district. Maggie gave a sharp nod. I'll make it happen. Ethan's gaze drifted back to the counter, where Javier was refilling drinks, looking far more at ease now. Mike flipped a patty without the usual stiffness in his posture. Sarah was already stepping into her new role, checking orders and coordinating the team. The change wasn't instant. It wasn't magic, but it was real. As Ethan made his way to the exit, he paused near Mike. 15 years, he said quietly. You stuck it out. Mike chuckled, shaking his head. Wasn't sure it was worth it. Maybe now it will be. Ethan nodded. It will be. He pushed open the door, stepping into the night air. He had walked into this restaurant expecting to find inefficiencies, small problems to fix. Instead, he had uncovered something much more important, the people who had been ignored, the ones who mattered most. And from this moment on, he would never ignore them again.